So I thought about, how do I kind of integrate all of this, all these different approaches and the way I'm kind of thinking about it. And for a while there, we were doing a one-way mirror training. We were doing CBT in the mornings on Fridays. We were doing EFT in the afternoon and family therapy in the evening. We were doing 10 sessions of one-way mirror with the same client, same therapist to kind of really see it progress over time. And we ran that for a couple of years. And it really helped me kind of integrate my thinking. So I ended up thinking about what would I call this? So I called it attachment-based cognitive behavioral systemic therapy, kind of throw it in all into one there. So one of the ways I think about it is that when we add systems into anything, we get better outcomes. So actually with almost all of my clients, I'm doing about 50% children, adolescents, about 25% couples, and about 50% individual adults. I'd love to do more family and adolescents, but I also have my own kids, so I like to be home by dinner time. But in about 90% of my clients, I have worked with their family or their partner or some part of their system at one time or another. And so we'll talk a little bit about that, how I kind of move from individual therapy to couples or couples to family or however it might be. But so we find in the research in Barlow's work on panic attacks, when they bring in the partner, if they're in a couple relationship, you get better outcomes and less relapse. Also in comparing multidimensional family therapy to cognitive behavioral therapy for marijuana abuse. At the end of treatment, no difference, but at follow-up, there's much more relapse for the individual only group. Also, if we look at Barrett et al.'s work with anxiety, that when they only did the work with the children, if there was a parent who also had an anxiety disorder, much higher relapse. So, and I'm sure folks know too, the expressed emotion research is such a huge factor in research, relapse for substance abuse, schizophrenia, bipolar, OCD, and so on. And that's really about the family dynamics. So when we add the systems in, again, we get more of those lasting changes. The other way I think about it is that our goal is the cognitive change. So if somebody say quit smoking or something like that, it has to have meaning to them of why they're doing it to sustain that change. And so we can get to this cognitive change and this cognitive shift through cognitive interventions, thought records, or so on, behavioral interventions, exposure, so on, and also experiential means. So an example I like to give in a stage 4 attachment session, I was working with a kid and he was telling his parent how he felt like a failure. And his father was able to say, my gosh, you're not a failure to me at all. I love you. I'm so proud of you. I get on you about your school and things like that, but you're not a failure. Through that attachment relationship, right, that core belief is going to shift much more significantly than if we just did a thought record of, the evidence for or against being a failure. Because again, we can utilize the resources in the environment. And what I also mean is that top down and bottom up processing, right? That kind of frontal lobe top down, and as well as the emotional limbic system, amygdala bottom up. So for example, with couples in EFT, the person may know cognitively that my partner loves me, although they still may not feel that secure attachment. And it's not really until that stage 2 when we have the person get vulnerable, turn to their partner, and their partner really is there for them, that we create that rebonding event, that we have that alignment between our head and our heart. So the next piece, attachment. So the way I think of attachment, to the extent that we can turn to the other and they'll be responsive, whether to talk about our bad day, talk about that thing they said that upset us, or in couples, talk about sex, money, the kids, and our partner will be responsive and will come out closer from that conversation rather than farther apart. And also to the extent that we feel loved, accepted, and respected. When those two pieces there, things are going well. But when they're not there, we tend to get into these cycles or patterns. So of course, this made sense in relationship to others, but I was thinking about, how does attachment play into self? And when I was at the Beck Institute, Judith Beck was talking about some of Aaron Beck's work and how he talked about all automatic thoughts boil down to either feeling helpless, hopeless, or unlovable. And it really struck me because when the person couldn't turn to the other and they weren't responsive, they felt helpless or hopeless. When they didn't feel loved, accepted, respected, they felt unlovable. So I thought not only do we relate to others this way, but also to ourselves. And since I've been doing a lot more parts work and learning internal family systems and structural dissociation, really, about how we relate to our parts of ourselves. And in IFS, we're really kind of creating that self, and connecting that self to reparent those younger parts and using that attachment essentially. And also how we relate to the world. So for example, if somebody has ADHD, it feels like their brain is not responsive. If they have panic, it feels like their body's not responsive. If there's depression, they feel unlovable. Or if there's been trauma, it feels like the world is not responsive, it's out of control. So not only do we relate to others through that kind of attachment lens, but also to ourselves and the world. And then the last piece is attachment is a way that we relate to our clients in session. So, and I don't mean like in a reparenting, psychoanalytic, several sessions a week for years and years, but more does our client feel like we're responsive, and not necessarily that we love them, but we have that unconditional positive regard. We value them, respect them. And so one of the things that we use at our group practice is the outcome rating scale and session rating scale, which is based on the common factors research. So the common factors research has found that no one particular therapy is so significantly better than another that it's the major change there. But really, it's the alliance between the therapist and the client. And so they create a questionnaire where the client is rating their self each session on outcome. And at the end, they're rating the session. Did they feel heard, understood, respected? Did they feel like you worked on what they wanted to work on? Did they feel like the things you're doing in the therapy was going to help them get to their goals? And they found by getting feedback, you could increase outcomes 65% regardless of theoretical orientation, because therapists tend to overestimate how good the therapy is going and overestimate how good their relationship is. So one way to think about it, say, for example, at the end of a session, client, I asked for feedback and they say, yeah, I felt like you didn't really understand what I was saying with my mother. I could say, you're right, that's important. Let me write that down. I want to start off with that in the next session. Or I might say, you're right, I wasn't conveying how betrayed you felt by her. Hopefully that client is going to see me as responsive and respecting and valuing what they have to say and walking away feeling more connected rather than feeling like, he didn't really get me. So that's kind of the way I think about attachment. And we can even establish that from the first phone call. The client gets the sense that you respect and value what they have to say, that you're responsive, and we can begin that that process almost immediately.